Hello and welcome back to the channel. This week I'm making this lightweight summer sweater with a top-down construction, and I'm using a soft gradient yarn, and the pattern has a very slight textured body that is surprisingly simple to crochet once you get into the rhythm. So I mentioned in my last videos that I had a stash of this ombre yarn from Loops and Threads, and I was going to use it up. I have quite a bit of it, so I'm thinking I'm going to make two different tops with it. So as I looked at swatching it, the color really is quite unpredictable on these yarns, and so I'm looking for a very simple stitch that might, not compete with this yarn. And I had checked out this book from the library called Crochet Sweaters with a Textured Twist. And if you follow my videos, you'll know the texture part is what caught my eye. And there's a lovely milk sweater pattern in here that, again, if you're looking for any information, if you couldn't find information in your library about this book, just refer to my Ravelry page. Now they're using a sport cotton blend, and again, I'm using a weight 3 acrylic polyester blend, so a different yarn. I have just a slightly different gauge than the pattern calls for, but using this same hook, a 4 hook. So I'm just going to pay careful attention to the sizing as I work this up for what is in the pattern a size 1 or for me a medium. Now again, as I swatched out this yarn, it was very clearly creating stripes, but you can't really predict the stripes and you can't really predict the color because it's all over the place. Some balls had 1 section of dark blue and other balls had 3. So I decided to control the color a little bit more by starting at the top with a little bit of the dark blue, and then my thought was putting a touch of that on the ends of the sleeves and on the lower half of the body. So we'll see how that plays out. And it's top down, so you're creating this in the round with a really nice yoke. So again, nice raglan sleeves, very basic, and some very easy increases as we go. So it's worked seamlessly from the neckline down, and I didn't have that many ends to weave in, even with all my color changes. So I'll show you as we work down how the yoke transforms into the body, where to take off the sleeves, and then how to add the additional texture on the lower section. Because since it's worked from the top down, it's easy to adjust both your length if you want it, or the sleeve depth as you go. Now the pattern called for a double crochet chain. I just began with a traditional chain of 88 stitches and then did a row of double crochet because I'm a lefty reading a right-handed pattern. And then for the second row, I began to create these ribs that you're going to see go all the way down from the neckline to the hem. And they're very simply created because in between your double crochets on round 2, you are just going to do a front post double crochet. Not just going to pop the stitch out to give you this lovely ribbed effect. And as you continue to work in the round for this sweater, you're just adding in increases in between each of these, kind of ribbed sections to gently increase the size of the sweater and the yoke as you go down. So somehow I ended up with 44 of these front post crochet things when the pattern called for 43, but again, didn't really make a big difference. I was looking at the measurements going down and I couldn't be bothered frogging it out because I didn't realize it right off the bat. Because my stitch count seemed to be somewhat in the neighborhood, but I had definitely had 1 more additional section than I should have if I was following the pattern perfectly. So you're just making, again, a lovely yoke, and it's pretty easy as you increase the rounds to, again, get that raglan style shaping, or, just a big circle basically as you're going down. And at this stage, it doesn't really look like a sweater yet. It almost kind of looks a little bit more like a cape, but that's exactly what we want. So as I went, I was checking the measurements for the shoulder placement and the armhole depth. So I'm going to flag when I have to make a quick change. And so this is one of my favorite things about this top and this pattern, because you can simply try them on as you go and decide whether you want to increase another round or whether or not it's ready to separate. So it'll be very easy for you if you decide to follow it. Again, as you do these front post double crochets, you're getting this raised rib effect. And so as you're, sitting and working on the rounds, it's pretty easy if you're not distracted like I was and you're just making sure that you've got, evenly spaced front post crochets as you go and you get into a bit of a rhythm. What maybe took me a little bit longer was figuring out somehow the color placement. So I'm juggling 5 different balls of yarn to get a little bit more consistency around the colors as I was going from light to dark and being a bit more specific about how I wanted the colors blocked out. And it doesn't show as well on camera, but there is a very definite striping effect that has anything from sort of a teal blue to a light blue as you continue on. So I'm just working out the yoke, and by row 33, I definitely knew I was going to have to make some adjustments. The pattern mentioned that the sleeves from the yoke to the sleeve, so if you're measuring the depth down, would be 14.5 inches, and the pattern had that at row 48, 49. I could tell I was going to reach that well before that point. So at this point, I'm already on the alert to make sure I don't continue to follow the pattern or this sweater would be absolutely huge. So again, easy increases, very easy because you're making the yoke and the sleeves all together as you go. And again, if you're using a solid yarn as the pattern did, the designer has it in a solid cotton blend, you wouldn't even be, hesitating to do some of the color change-ups that I was. So here I'm going back to the dark color because again, I wanted that on the edge of the sleeves. And then at row 38, I had to remove the sleeves by, again in crochet, just leaving those stitches unworked and continuing to work down in the body. Now there were a few decreases, stitches under the arms in the pattern book as I went, because I'm doing again a bit of a jig jog as I kind of follow the pattern, but now I'm off by about 10 rows. And at the point where you're also taking the arms off, you're adding in some V puff stitches on half of the ribs to kind of start to finish off the ribs as you work your way down the body as well. So again, as we work down the body today, you're basically going to look at doing alternating V puffs on half of the rib stitches to start, and it staggers then the difference on 2 sets of staggered rib puffs. So the pattern calls for a V puff, so 2 worked into 1 stitch, and we're going to repeat that 4 times on each of the ribs that we're doing the puffs on. Then we do 4 additional single puffs to finish off, and then you just double crochet and it's blending it right into the sweater. Once you've done the first set of alternating V puffs or puff stitches, then you're picking up the ribs that you're continuing to front post double crochet so that you have a staggered kind of wheat sheaf pattern as you finish off the bottom half of the sweater. So again, very beginner friendly. The designer did this in a cotton blend and she picked a cream, but it was also in different colors on Ravelry. When I compare the variegated pattern and the colors that I'm using to the sort of solid colors, I really don't think these puff stitches stand out dramatically more on the solids. So you could go and compare those if you'd like. I think if you really did want to accent these ribs and V puffs, it would have been better, for example, you could sort of imagine if I had done them in white. So doing the ribbing in the front post and the puffs in white to just pop off this kind of variegated background color. Now, I've also used this exact kind of wool in a gray ombre on a different project, and the striping effect wasn't as apparent as it is here. It was a lot more kind of blended, softer flowing color, but that was because on the other project I was alternating skeins. I had two different balls going. The reason, because I really liked that look, that version of this yarn, the reason I didn't try it here was I wanted this to be a really light, airy summer sweater. So I was liking this pattern with the really simple stitch that I thought might pair well with the variegated yarns, might actually not, you know, compete with it too much. And I liked the fact that this double crochet kind of was very light and airy and made it kind of very summer appealing. So on the other project that I have posted information about, it is really kind of a fall year-round, not, you know, 40-degree summer top when you're doubling up this yarn. It's a polyester acrylic blend, and so while I think this sweater is going to be lovely for summer evenings and light breezes, the other yarn definitely would not kind of be a summer top kind of weather. So, well, I love the effect if you double up the yarn, and that's definitely an option. That wouldn't be my recommendation. If you really don't like the variegated play out of the colors, what I would recommend is thinking about adding a white, like maybe a white cotton in a 3-weight mixed in with this. Wouldn't kind of, you know, make it too heavy and hot for summertime. You could again make a larger hook to make the stitches larger, make it a little bit bigger and airier. And I think that would really work and complement. And I actually think, if I'm being honest, I probably, if I'd put a white solid with this, would like the sweater even a little bit more. So that would probably be the direction that I would lean in, and pairing it up with a solid just to kind of have it, give it a little bit more shape maybe. And although this does have a nice drape and a little bit more of a softer color transition versus the stripes. So let me know what you think. As we work down the body, again, I mentioned that this pattern, the smallest size is a medium large, I would say, because it's a bust 34 to 38. I stopped 10 rows early because I was already at the yoke depth by that point. My sleeves ended up about an inch bigger than the pattern. So again, with just a slight difference on my hook size, I was much larger. And by the time I made the edits and got to the length, the pattern size calls for a 21.5-inch sweater, and I ended up at 22 inches, and that's again with me eliminating 10 or 11 rows out of the pattern. So definitely just look at sizing if you're going to pick up and start this project, because it is a really friendly, very easy beginner project to work on. Now, again, I ended up with straight sides from the arms down. There were just a couple of decreases under the arm, so it didn't really do anything. And then I finished it off with the recommended kind of ribbing on the bottom, which was a front post, back post rib. I didn't bother doing that on the sleeves. I actually used a slip stitch to finish off the sleeves because, again, they were oversized to what the pattern was calling for. I didn't want to make them bigger or stretchier with the ribbing on the bottom. So it finished off nicely, but when I measured, again, the bottom, it actually is smaller, narrower than what the pattern calls for. So the pattern looks like it should have flared out more at the base, and I'm not really sure why it did that. I did a stitch count. I didn't drop stitches. So again, if you have larger hips, just something you might want to be aware of as you play around with this pattern. But again, simple, gorgeous. I think I absolutely will make this pattern again, and I will probably get many requests for it. Thanks everyone for watching, and give us a thumbs up or thumbs down to have some helpful feedback on whether or not you like the videos. Thanks if you've subscribed to the channel as well and helped us grow as we try and support some great charities. And you can also click the notification bell. It will let you know when we upload a new video. Enjoy your summer, and we'll look forward to sharing some more ideas.